Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. O Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. It's one good thing about staying at home. You know how it's done. Today we will hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 15, Text 29. Text 29. Full stop. Yata vartadayo hi artha yata vartadayo yarta yogasyartam na bibhrati yogasyartam na bibhrati anarthaya bhaveyu sma anarthaya bhaveyu sma putam ishtam tathasata putam ishtam tathasata yata vartadayo hyartha yogasyartam na bibhrati anarthaya bhaveyu sma putam ishtam tathasata yata vartadayo hyartha yogasyartam na bibhrati anarthaya bhaveyu sma putam ishtam tathasata. Others, please. Oh, any online attendees? Apparently not. Yeah, I need that help.
Yes, Maharaj, sorry, what is the number of the verse?
29.
Yes, 29. Just a second. Oh my God. Okay. Yatra yatra Hare Archa Sadesha Shreyatsam Padam.
Chapter 15, Canto 7.
7:15:29.
Oh, 15. My God.
He's a long ways away, so it's a little hard to hear what's going on. Island boy.
Let it go, Maharaj, I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. My hearing aids are on the fritz, so I don't always hear everything. Word to word. Yata, as. Varta adaya, Activities like occupational or professional duties. He, certainly. Artha, income from such occupational duties. Yogasya, of mystic power for self-realization. Artam, benefit. Na, not. Bibhriti, help. Anartaya, without value. Binding one to repeated birth and death. Bhaveyu, they are. Sma, at all times. Purtamishtam, ritualistic Vedic ceremonies. Tata, similarly. Asata, of a materialistic non-devotee. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As professional activities or business profits cannot help one in spiritual advancement, but are a source of material entanglement, the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies cannot help anyone who is not a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Responsively, please. As professional activities or business profits cannot help one in spiritual advancement, but are a source of material entanglement, the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies cannot help anyone who is not a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada's purport. If one becomes very rich through his professional activities, through trade, or through agriculture, this does not mean that he's spiritually advanced. To be spiritually advanced is different from being materially rich. Although the purpose of life is to become spiritually rich, unfortunate men, misguided as they are always engaged in trying to become materially rich. Such material engagements, however, do not help one in the actual fulfillment of the human mission. On the contrary, material entanglements lead one to be attracted to many unnecessary necessities. There's a phrase for you. How do you say that in Sanskrit? Anartha. Which are accompanied by the risk that one may be born in a degraded condition. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Urdhvam gachanti sattvasta madhye tishtanti rajasaha jaganyaguna vrittistha adho gachanti tamasaha. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. Especially in this Kali Yuga, material advancement means degradation and attraction to many unwanted necessities that create low mentality. Therefore, Jaganya Guna Vrittistha, since people are contaminated by the lower qualities, they will lead their next lives either as animals or in other degraded forms of life. Making a show of religion without Krishna consciousness may make one popular in the estimation of unintelligent men, but factually such a materialistic display of spiritual advancement does not help one at all. It will not prevent one from missing the goal of life. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukhaṁ karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamahang bande Shri Gurun dinataranam. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyang Dadati Swapadantikam Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, that's not helping. Yata vartadayo hyartad yogasyartam na bibrati anartaya bhave yusma purtam mishtam tata sataha. As professional activities or business profits cannot help one in spiritual advancement, but are a source of material entanglement, the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies cannot help anyone who's not a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there are a couple of things that we can take note of in this verse and purport. One is that material success is not at all the equivalent of spiritual success. There was a line of thought that was very prominent in American culture especially, I think, and persists to some extent, kind of like the basis of the Protestant work ethic, which is the idea that the evidence of your being favored by God is the material comforts you enjoy. The amount of wealth you've accumulated, how big your house is, how many followers you have, etc. But this verse refutes that quite clearly. It's not a fact that someone has some wealth or some position, some power, some reputation, because they've been favored by God. This is karma. This is the world of karma. You do something that's not bad, you do something that's okay, that's beneficial for other people, you get some benefit in the future. This is a transaction. Krishna kind of brings this up in his argument with Nanda Maharaj about worshiping King Indra. We don't need to worship some sky god to get, to be wealthy. All we need to do is our duty. We're Vaishyas. Our duty is to grow crops and take care of cows. And our wealth is the milk produced by those cows. Worshiping some sky god doesn't, we could try it and see, ignoring him and seeing what works well. That turned into an interesting little drama. But, Krishna argued from this materialistic perspective, and Nanda was charmed. What was he, 7 years old, and he's making such lofty arguments? That's cute. But he didn't buy it. And ultimately, Krishna was able to convince him. But these materialistic perspectives, this is not spiritual life. And the idea of even worshiping the Lord to get some benefit, to get ahead in the world, that's not a spiritual life. It's part of Varnashram, right? Karmakanda is part of Varnashram. It's a big part of what's taught in the Vedic scriptures. So many things are taught in the Vedas. There's something for everyone. For those who want to get ahead in this material world, there's so many prescriptions for material success, for the accumulation of wealth, to get a good husband or a good wife or whatever it is we might want. That's not a spiritual, that's a religious life, maybe. But it's not a spiritual life because it's transactional. There isn't love. Krishna says, one of my friends, when we were discussing Nectar of Devotion and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu the other day, said something about because especially, I've got health problems, and now that I'm getting pretty old, it seems harder to please Krishna by doing great things for him. Krishna doesn't ask for great things. He'll accept meager things if that's what you've got, and it's offered with love. He doesn't say in the 9th chapter of the Gita, if you offer me a plate as big as a room full of that whole list. I mentioned this the other day somewhere in Arizona. You take that whole list of preparations from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhoga Arati song. We were reading last night about Rasala in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Yogurt mixed with sugar and pepper. They become one. The sugar and the pepper become kind of homogenized with the yogurt. Still, you can distinguish the sweetness and you can distinguish the little bite in the pepper. So that's rasala. So you have this whole, he doesn't need that. That's not what he's asking for. He doesn't say he'll accept it if it's on a gold plate or copper plate, because there are shastra that say that the Lord appreciates being worshipped with copper instruments even more than silver and gold. So even if you put it on a copper plate and you have a whole pile of all the stuff, luchi, chini, sarapuri, laddu, rasavali, and whatever, that's not what he's going to accept. If I bring that to him and I say, oh Lord, won't you give me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all have Porsches, I must make amends. He's not going to be impressed by that. He's got so many copper plates full of yummy stuff. But it's the bhakti. What do you give a man? They ask sometimes, what do you give someone who's got everything? Well, you got to find the one thing that person doesn't have. I'll tell you what that one thing is: my heart. That's going to impress him. So this kind of transactional business isn't spiritual life. It's rejected right out of the chute, right out of the gate. I'm trying to guess it's mixing my metaphors up. Right out of the gate. In the Bhagavatam, second verse, the Vastu Nirdesha sloka, the sloka that tells us what the Bhagavatam's about. It also tells us who's going to be the most appreciative audience right at the beginning. Dharma projita kaitavatra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. This is something for those who are pure in heart. And why do we say they're pure in heart? Because they don't have any envy. They're not keeping any envy in their hearts. And how is it that they're free of envy? They don't have a personal agenda. They've already as Krishna says at the end of the Gita, give up all conventional conceptions of dharma and just take shelter in me. At the beginning of the Bhagavatam, he picks up in the next step. For those who've done that, who've completely rejected these things. And the language is even stronger. Kaitava dharma. Dharma praujhita. Already completely rejected Kaitava dharma. Why cheating religion? I probably mentioned this too many times. I don't think, perhaps enough maybe. Too many times for some folks' ears, not enough for my heart. I hasn't penetrated yet. Because they're all selfish activities. I'm looking for my virtue so that I can get ahead in the world and I can enjoy. And then when you see through the whole thing, I need to be free. So it's called Kaitava Dharma because it's selfishly motivated. So that's not spiritual life. That's business. That's just business. Krishna's not interested. So these things aren't going to help us get ahead in the world. Instead, they lead us to be attracted to many unnecessary necessities, anartha, false values, things that are anartha, not really beneficial, because they just entangle us in the material world more and more. And I was thinking, this is kind of what I was looking for. I wanted to make sure I had these verses all right. But in the beginning of the 11th canto, King Nimi, out on pilgrimage, encounters these 9 sages, 9 sons of King Rishabhadev, the Naviyogendras. And he has a question for each one of the sages. And one of the questions he asks, how does somebody like me, materialistic dope, actually become free from the entanglement of the material world? And I think it's the sage Prabuddha. Some of my friends made me a little pie chart, what verses are spoken by which of the sages in those first few chapters of the 11th canto. And I haven't taken time to memorize this little pie, but I think it's Prabuddha. He explains to him that all the stuff that we want in this world is not really going to satisfy us at all. So he says, we become entangled in sex because of our attraction to the comforts of having the company of women. And that just leads to more problems. Wealth, oh my God, just one headache after another. It's just nothing but trouble. Ask most of the people who've won the big prizes in the lotto. Usually those are people who don't know how to manage any money, much less that kind of money. And the stories are, well, you could have encyclopedias full of stories of the people whose lives were undone by winning the lottery. They became even worse. And then he says, oh, Swarga? Okay. But still, you're going to be envious of people who are in a better position than you are, and you're still going to worry about when it ends. Krishna says, in the Bhagavad Gita, ninth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you can go to heaven, you can do all these things, and you can go to Svarga, but when your credit runs out, kshine punya martaloka vishanti. Back down into the toilet of the world of birth and death. I think that's what I must be thinking when I always do this with that verse, and I think I must, it must be a swirly or something. So, the sage says that stuff just doesn't work. He says, therefore, tasmad gurum prapadyeta jigyasu shaya uttama. Therefore, we need someone who's free from all these things to actually show us how to attain the real goal of life. We need to take shelter of a genuine spiritual master, someone who's Brahmanyu Pushamashraya. Srila Prabhupada once said he's taken a dip in the ocean of transcendence. And that's not dipped his toe, like we might in December down at the ocean there. I don't know what the water temperature is there now, but I'm not at all inclined to go in, and I'm an ocean guy. But it's total immersion, right? Full Southern Baptist, dip them, scare the heck out of them by dipping them in the river and holding them down until they need a breath, baptism, become infused with the Holy Spirit. So, you know, this is the kind of guidance we need, because it's the bhakti, and that's what we want with that kind of association, is to be able to partake of their bhakti. In his Madhurya Kadambini, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains just how bhakti works. He starts by explaining how independent Krishna is. How independent is Krishna? Completely, absolutely. 108%, right? And he does that to make the point that bhakti is every bit as independent as Krishna. And she can go wherever she likes, but here's how she chooses to work. Having taken shelter in the hearts of those who receive her from bhaktas, when they come to the platform of a Madhyama Bhakta, a Madhyama Vaishnava, and are therefore able to discriminate among different kinds of personalities, and therefore know how to behave in different kinds of company, wherever they show kindness, she follows their lead. So, I mean, why are we talking about this kind of discrimination? Bhagavatam explains, again in the early part of the 11th canto, that the Uttama Bhakta doesn't have any proper discrimination. The Uttama Bhakta sees everybody as serving Krishna better than they are. Who's there for them to instruct? Who's there for them to give mercy to? They want everybody else's mercy. And the Kanishta Bhaktas, the Kanishta Vaishnavas, kind of a nice, very generous term, materialistic devotee, they can't discriminate properly because their vision's too narrow. The Uttama Adhikari can't discriminate properly because their vision's too broad. Everybody's a better servant of Krishna than I am. And the Kanishta, they can't discriminate properly because their vision is too narrow. Only my crew, only the people in my church are worth associating with. Only my God is worth worshiping. I remember once we were out going door to door in Honolulu. This is a big part of our preaching program starting early in 1971. And we used to have these, I don't know if they still have them, but these Thomas Brother map books that show you every block. So we had one for every street, every block on the island of Oahu. And we had covered, in the few years that we did that, we'd covered pretty much all of Honolulu and Kailua and Kaneohe and Pearl City and Aiea, and then farther out on the North Shore we'd done some. But one day we went to one door, and we had a lot of doors shut in our faces. That was just part of the thing. And one day, as a guy was shutting his front door in our face, the devotee that I was with that day, a dear friend of mine, the guy, as he was slamming his door, he said, "We have our own God." And my friend said, "What do you do? Keep him in a cage?" I think we had probably had one too many doors slammed in our face that day, and he just kind of lost his patience. So because their vision is so narrow, that God lives in my church, my temple, He gives his favor to the people who come to this church. And we kind of have this attitude too. God favors Hare Krishna devotees. Specifically for us, ISKCON Hare Krishna devotees. Another Kanishta Bhakta might think, oh, Krishna only loves Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Hare Krishna devotees, or whatever. That's that narrow Kanishta attitude. But the Madhyama Bhakta has a different vision. It's broader. The Madhyama Bhakta sees God, sees the devotees, sees those who are innocent, those who haven't yet received bhakti, and those who are inimical, the atheists. And they behave differently with each of those. They love God, they make friends with the devotees, they're kind, compassionate to the innocent, they share their bhakti, their shraddha. That's what we call preaching. It really amounts to sharing whatever faith we have in bhakti with others, and whatever bhakti we might have. And for the atheists, the inimical, no time. They neglect them. They don't bother with them. Because it's wasted time. You're spinning your wheels talking to them. So, where was I going with this? Oh, so that's how bhakti works. So we hear from the Bhagavatam that bhakti is ahaituki. It's causeless. That means it doesn't have any cause outside of herself. And we hear again in the 11th canto, bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya. Bhakti comes from bhakti. Specifically, it's talking about prema bhakti coming from sadhana bhakti. But where do we get the sadhana bhakti? We get the sadhana bhakti from the bhaktas with whom we associate. So this is real spiritual life. This is not business. This is just love. Last night we schedule an hour for our get-togethers to discuss the nectar of devotion and the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Yesterday we went a little over an hour and a half because we were having such a good time. And it, just kind of churning the nectar of devotional service, different verses and different insights that come from reading different verses. And we actually, none of us wanted to stop, but there was one devotee who wanted to stop because they had just found out about an important conversation that another devotee had with someone else, and really wanted to find out how that conversation went, because it has a lot to do with their future. But other than that, nobody really wanted to stop. Krishna says in the Gita, Matchita madgata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantas chamam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. That those who are Krishna's devotees, thoughts dwell in him, they get their bliss, they get their satisfaction by talking about Krishna. Best conversations that we have are those that are focused on how to satisfy Krishna. So just as earlier in the Bhagavatam, we see that even if you do something like Varnashram Dharma, and Varnashram, don't get me wrong, Varnashram Dharma, Krishna says it's his system. Of course, he also says afterwards, I don't have anything to do with it. Immediately afterwards. Still, if we engage in Varnashram perfectly, for 100 lifetimes, what do we get? What's the prize we win? Maybe we get to be a Brahma. But there's an expiration date on that. It's a long ways off. It's a very long gig, but it's still a gig. It's still just a job that you have for a short time. And so the Bhagavatam says that if by engaging in all your occupational duties perfectly, you still don't get a taste for hearing these topics, then it's shrama eva hi kevalam. Just as we saw yesterday, waste of time, just a waste of time. So in his commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur kind of he boils it down. Srila Prabhupada kind of expands it to make it a little more accessible. But he says, it's just as occupations like farming, though they produce wealth and pleasure, don't produce liberation, which is the goal of yoga, and therefore they're useless for attaining the ultimate goal. He says, so sacrifices performed by someone who doesn't have bhakti, they don't produce any result. It's like pouring ghee on a bed of cold ashes. Nothing's going to happen. You're just going to have a mess. So you don't get any real result. So this business transaction that a lot of people think of as religion doesn't really afford anyone the opportunity for spiritual advancement. It just entangles us ever more deeply in the material world. So we need guidance. We need the association of devotees to help us see the way out of the mess we've gotten ourselves into. Okay, any discussion? Comments, questions? Sankarshana Prabhu. Oh, sorry.
Thank you for the class. I just had a question with this, I guess, different stages of realization of like Uttama and Adhikari. Like how can one like track their progress, or like how's like, it's like say, okay, like I'm on this level, and what are my weaknesses and my strong suits, or what should I avoid? I don't know if that makes sense.
The key is introspection. This is something that's maybe a little difficult for us in different situations. My experience has been that temple life is sometimes, ashram life is sometimes so full of service that has to be done and is encouraged to be done. This is how you become purified. This is, behave in such a way that Krishna will want to come and see you. But we don't have time to reflect, to assimilate, and to really check our heart to see how whether we're moving and how we're moving. So this is a problem. And my concern for this regularly gets me into trouble at the temple where I've taken shelter. Because if I bring it up at an ISKCON, then I'll be confronted by the managers later. What were you thinking? But the fact is, if we want devotees' practice to be sustainable, they need to be actually able to grow it. They need time to reflect and process what's going on in their lives. These are huge sea changes, as they say, that are taking place in our heart when we engage in bhakti. And how do we know we're making progress? The key's there, again, in the 11th canto. There's a verse, one of the verses, I think it might be Kavi or Havi speaking this one. He says, Bhakti pareshano bhavo viraktiranyatra cha trika eka kalaha. This is three things happen simultaneously and progressively as we engage in devotional service, as we engage in this practice of bhakti. First is bhakti itself, which is inherent in the activity. And then pareshano bhava, some direct experience of the Lord. And it doesn't have to be some amazing sporty that just kind of like makes your heart burst out of your chest, like with Dhruva. Doesn't have to be anything as spectacular as that. Sometimes we get that experience from a really heartfelt kirtan, or a really good talk about Krishna consciousness, or some good Mahaprasadam or something like that. It can be something as accessible as that. And then the third thing is viraktiranyatra, becoming detached from everything else. And the verse has an analogy built in, because the second line of the verse explains three things that happen as we take a meal. Tushti, pushti, kshudapaya. These three things happen simultaneously and progressively as we eat a meal. Tushti, pleasure; pushti, nourishment; and kshudapaya, relief from hunger, which is analogous with detachment from everything else. So if we see ourselves, if we can track ourselves, I don't know if we've got a tracker like that for an app for your smartwatch like that yet, but maybe someday. Am I feeling more devotion? Am I experiencing Krishna's presence in my life more and more each day? And this is the empirical check. Or at least more empirical check, am I becoming more detached from material pleasure? So, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on that verse, he explains that it begins with the very first morsel of food. The tushti, the pushti, and the kshudapaya. So that spiritual progress begins, as he says in a commentary on a verse in the first canto, from the first day of worshiping the Lord. That's a verse that talks about our becoming haunted by rasa. And he says, if it sounds really lofty to you, fine, but it actually begins with the first day of practice, and he uses this 11th canto verse as his pramana, as his evidence. And in his commentary, he says, it starts with the first. And he says, so just as someone who eats a lot gets more pleasure, more nourishment, and greater relief from hunger, so someone who engages in bhakti progressively gets more bhakti, gets more experience of the Lord, and more detached from everything else. And then he points out at the end of his commentary where the analogy breaks down. You can't keep eating forever, but you can keep serving forever. So it's always, always going to grow. So it takes some reflection. We need, and if we have good association, if we actually have devotees we trust that we can share our hearts with, they can kind of help us check that as well. Sadhu Sangha is so important. Is that okay? I think it's a start anyway. Dravida Prabhu?
Yeah, just one comment on the, you mentioned about going to the heavenly planets, and you cited that verse in the 9th chapter, Chine Punye Mati Lokam Vishanti. So Krishna's, he's trying to deter us from going that route because you're just going and coming, you're not really making any. But there's another deterrence. I think it's Dharmasetu who told me that he had read about when you finally run out of punya and you're kicked out of it, heavenly planets. It's not. It's a quite ghastly experience because on your way down, apparently your body is being eaten by and attacked and consumed by rakshasas and things like that. When you finally come in, and it's not a smooth escalator ride down to the.
It's not just going down the water slide.
Yeah, and it's like, the ultimate deterrent. I mean, your parents try to tell you, no, if you go to that party, you're gonna drink, and that'll be bad for you, and to try to scare you about what happens, and then you lose everything.
Meanwhile, we're thinking that's the point.
But I never heard that before. This was about the end of it all when your credit is finally used up. It's a nightmarish situation, Huh? Vaikuntha Prabhu. Actually, you can ask him when you get a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like a water slide, it's like a spiky slide. You get shredded. Thank you for that. That's lovely. Lovely to contemplate. And also, when we've had something and lose it, there's trauma. That itself is traumatic. We don't even necessarily need all those people taking chunks out of us on our way down. The whole thing is a shock. It's a trauma anyway. And here we are in the Martya Loka. Anything else? Anything in interwebs land? Vijay Krishna Prabhu? There's a lag. I guess not. I guess that's permission to stop.
No, Maharaj, I'm here.
I spoke too soon. I thought I was going to stop on time. Yes, Vijay Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj, I have a question. In the purport, I read that, quote, those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds, close quote. So based on this quote, my question is, why is it that the mode of ignorance is frequently linked with hellish quality of life?
Good question. The mode of ignorance, how does Krishna describe it? It's painful in the beginning and painful in the end. Poison in the beginning and poison in the end. It's not a happy life. So it's equated. He says, "Adho gachanti tamasa." It means they just go down. The word hell isn't there specifically, but it's implied. So we can infer that because it's a life of suffering, and if we see people who are really in the mode of ignorance, and their suffering is so great that they try to obliterate it by immersing themselves in the pursuit of pleasure, or just kind of a mental or emotional oblivion because they cannot deal with the pain in their heart. So they use drugs or intoxication to distract them from it. And quite often, we see them. We see them on the streets everywhere. Their lives are just sleeping and nodding out from heroin addicts. Their thing is they're going to nod out. When I first became a devotee, one of the devotees explained to me that the merging in the with the Brahma Jyoti was kind of like an inexpensive heroin experience, where you just kind of like, you don't have any experience, so you don't have the pain, and that's all. It's all just suffering. I mean, it's all suffering. Krishna tells us, he sums our whole experience up in 2 words in the Gita: Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. There's problems, and then you die. When we say dukkha, we often use the word suffering, but also we love to use the word misery. But it just really, if you look in Monier Williams, it means things aren't satisfactory. Things aren't the way that we expect them to be. So it can be something as simple as I sometimes point out as somebody snaking the parking spot you've been waiting for with your blinker on. All of a sudden, as the guy pulls out, they whip around and pull into the spot, and you're sitting there like, what? Or the older lady in the checkout line who's paying for her purchase with coins from the little plastic coin purse. And I have to point out that nowadays that little old lady's probably considerably younger than I am, and that's when I usually turn around to the people behind me and I say, "I'm sorry. This always happens when I get in the line, so it must be me." So it can be things as apparently insignificant as that, but they're annoying to us. When we're in the middle of it, it's like, oh my God, is this never going to end? And sometimes rage ensues. So that's also probably just a beginning of an answer, but I'm also thinking of the time. Dravida Prabhu?
1 minute. In the end of the third, in the second chapter, sorry, you have those famous verses, Jayato Vishyan Panksa Sanghashtesh Vijay, and it's kind of the downward slope. You're going. So you meditate on the object of the senses, and you develop attachment, you develop lust, and when the kama is frustrated, it's anger, and when the anger comes, and you lose your intelligence, and then you're completely lost, right? So that's really a descent into the mode of ignorance.
Yeah.
And you're completely at the mercy of your own impulses, and the anger covers your intelligence. You do something that ruins your life, you get imprisoned or something, and down you go.
Yeah. And that's hell.
Yeah, that's hell.
That's it. Yeah, you don't even don't necessarily have to go to a special place, and Okay, thank you so much. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.